Hello, everyone. This is Planet Genesis podcast across the world, and we're back here today to talk about North Korea and the persecuted church within. Today's guest is Elijah Choi, who was born and raised in Korea, now currently living in the US. Welcome, Elijah. So happy to have you here today. So, can you tell me about yourself a little bit before we go?
I was born and raised up in Korea. To give a little bit of background, I was raised up in Korea till I was 16. Then I moved to Australia. But I always grew up in a praying family context. Both of my parents were, men and women of prayer. And maybe this has related to North Korea too. But my grandpa is actually from North Korea, so he moved down to South before Korean War. So I guess technically I am half, we don't, in Koreans, we always see ourselves just Korean. But, if I have to make a distinction, but I guess I am half North Korean. So I definitely have a heart for North Korea. Yeah. So and I'm a full-time staff here at IHOP.
What kind of feelings do you have towards North Korea?
I mean, there's so many, different emotions that goes on. When you think about injustice, when you think about persecution, when you think about poverty, when you think about starvation, when you think about, I can go on and on and on. But when I think of North Korea, it's hard for me to say, it's hard to define what I actually feel because I've never been there. I don't know what it feels to starve. I don't know. Because I grew up in South Korea. We have the top 10 economy in the world. We're one of the wealthiest countries in the world. So for my generation, I don't know if we can actually say how we feel about North Korea. But one thing that I do always, there's something that's in my heart is that I have a desire to see a change. I have a strong desire to see a change, just because I believe. Not just because we are blood related, but because when I look at North Korea, I see God's inheritance, and I'm jealous for God's inheritance. So I have a strong emotions. I don't always know what that is. It could be, sadness. Sometimes it could be anger. Not anger in a sense of bitterness, but anger in a sense of I hate injustice. I hate injustice. I don't want to see any more orphans being starved to death. I don't want to see any more widows being killed and slaughtered in the streets. So I have lots of emotions that goes in within me, but I can't really say this is it. Sometimes I feel pleasure over North Korea when I think of Isaiah 62, where the Lord actually, this is a prophecy for Israel, but I always pray this prayer to North Korea. And it's a prayer the Lord said, you shall no longer be called desolate. You shall be called Hapsivah and Beulah. The Lord delights in you. So I feel the delight of the Lord. And sometimes I feel sadness. Sometimes I feel grief. So I think there are a lot of emotions inside of me. Yeah.
What is the lifestyle as Christians in North Korea?
I think the answer to that question can be traced back all the way to the scripture. When we think about Daniel, and his three friends, Babylon was real Babylon, and Nebuchadnezzar was a real dictator. Because sometimes we think about Nebuchadnezzar in the context of Daniel chapter 4, where he gets saved, and he's glorifying the Lord. But if you actually look at the historical context, the Cyrus that we always talk about, the great Cyrus who let the Jews go back to their land and rebuild the temple, it was a brutal dictator. So Ezra learned to live underneath Cyrus. Daniel learned to live underneath Nebuchadnezzar. So I think here is I guess your question is what's their life look like, right? Yeah. I think it's just like that. I think the only difference will be the setting or the environment, but I think the atmosphere and the spiritual warfare they go through is something like what Daniel went through. I've heard stories of people. So if you look at the North Korean system, the way they control people's lives, they put one spy in every 8 individual. So in every town, in in a setting of like say maybe 4 houses, there's at least one spy, and you just never know who's a spy, because they will never tell you. They're just normal people, but they always report everything, like every act. They write it down and report it back to the to the government. So it's real. I mean, the system they built is just insane. Like you can't do anything. Like if you happen to preach the gospel, or if you happen to meet someone one-on-one and get, I mean, there's someone watching you all the time. Not like, for example, like children are being brainwashed, right? Children of North Korea are not being taught by their own parents. They're being taught by the regime. So there is more control from the regime than their own parents. Meaning, children get rewarded for telling their parents' secret, and they are taught in the age of 6 and 7 to do this. So children not knowing anything about prison camps and the reality of the regime, they always tell their teachers about everything their parents do. And they don't know what the consequences will be. Like, for example, a child might see, his dad reading a Bible, and it's not a red book. Red book is like a North Korean textbook. And, he sees it, and he will go tell his teacher about it. And the next day, you find out that your dad's gone. He's not around, So in every angle, there's someone who's watching over you. So the life of North Korean believers are very, I don't know, I guess very dangerous somewhat. But it's funny because there are over 300,000 believers in North Korea. And so that only tells you the gospel is spreading. So it's almost like, I guess we can put it in the context of Book of Acts. Book of Acts, they were under the regime of Nero. Nero was a real dictator too. He was killing Christians, he was crucifying them, he was burning them alive, he was putting into them in the lion's den. But during that time, I mean, whole Asia Minor, it says Acts 19, whole Asia Minor heard the gospel. I don't know how it happened, but it happened. So, the history proves greater persecution, greater power of God is being manifested. I mean, I don't know. You talk about Muslims, there's more persecution in the Middle East than almost anywhere else. But Jesus is appearing in front of Muslims, like in a dream. And we're talking about, I remember reading one story about Somalia, and this individual was a firstborn child of a pirate of Somalia, the captain of the pirate. And he was calling upon the name of Allah one day in his room, and a man appeared with dripping of blood, and his blood was dripping over this young man, and he was getting soaked by blood, and the cross appeared. So dramatic, unthinkable supernatural encounters take place. So my point being, I think sometimes people do get caught and get taken to prison camps and get killed or persecuted. But other times, Peter's encounter, how the prison doors opened up, and he was led by angels, and there's protection. So I think both takes place. It's almost like Daniel's 3 friends were kept from the fire in a furnace in the middle of persecution. So I think it always is in that kind of context. But I think there's never, I'll say this, they cannot worship out loud. That's for a fact. So you will never see a North Korean believer worshiping out loud freely. It's always, hiding behind a closet, or maybe there's a hole underneath your house, or, I don't know, or sometimes I heard stories that people go up on a mountain, on the top of the mountain, and in the middle of the night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, just to pray. Or, they will go underneath the blanket and just whisper prayers. So all the time, it will be like something like that. It's never in a public, or, you see someone evangelizing, It's always very secretly, but it just works. That's how, but during the day, I guess they would just live normal life, just like how the Europeans did under Hitler. they will just pretend as if they're just, just normal folk, a farmer or teacher or doctor, but it's during the night or, when, the lights are off, they will just, do like their religious activities or, confess their faith or things like that. So.
Can you share more about underground church in North Korea?
Okay, I think there are both sides of North Korea. A lot of people, when they think of North Korea, they only picture ISIS prison camp. Like meaning like in their mind, they only see like a desolate, desert type scene where people are just being killed everywhere, all that, and which is true, and I will testify that that is really taking place. But at the same time, things have changed over the years and over decades. So some of the sources that I have received from different, missionaries or ministries is that a lot of things are changing in the culture of North Korea. For example, Juche ideology, which is what the regime is built upon, the whole ideology behind the regime, demands complete control over people's lives. Meaning, you like North Koreans get killed for watching U.S. dramas and Korean TV shows. Like you will get killed and slaughtered for listening to radios and other sources outside of North Korea. However, so here's what I mean by there has been a change. People apparently, because of the starvation and dire condition of North Korea, I guess the regime is losing their authority and control over people slowly. And I guess there has been this black market that has been created over the years. And so from people get, like I've heard stories like people are buying Bibles in the black market. I mean, that is insane. You could not imagine that like a decade ago. That was just that's impossible. But nowadays, apparently, people trade Bibles like King James Version, NLT version. I mean, this is unthinkable. And apparently, I remember hearing this from a pastor who actually works with North Korean defectors. And he said, like, the black market has grown to a point where people will bring their items to return the item or exchange to another translation. So, I mean, like, radios are being sold, DVD players. So when we talk about underground church, we want to have a right picture of the underground church. It's not always the church underneath the ground, like back in Asia Minor. Although there are still some regions and some cities in North Korea there who are living in that condition, but some underground churches look like people gathering in an apartment. Because people in Pyongyang, they're fairly wealthy. They have somewhat normal life. It is those who are outside of Pyongyang who are going through unthinkable starvation and just suffering. So people say, for example, underground church in Pyongyang will have a different expression than underground church in like Yejin or like different towns. So I think there are both sides. There are real people really being tormented day and night in prison camps in North Korea. For example, camp number 22. Prison camp number 22 have more than 10,000 believers right now. And it is known as the most persecuted prison camp in the world. Okay, so you picture Hitler and Nazi regime and what they did to Jews during that period and that time. The Holocaust is being exactly presented in that prison camp. But on the other end, in Pyongyang, people live life. So I think when we say underground church, there are different expressions all throughout North Korea. But it is clear that if you are found as a confessing believer, if you are caught in any religious activity, then your destiny will be prison camp. Like that will be the rest of your life. So the level of persecution is still the highest in the world. That's by statistics. I think it's the Voice of the Martyrs. They're a known ministry here in the States. And according to statistics, The most persecuted church in the world in North Korea, by far. Second is Somalia. So Iraq is not even there. Like, so we think about, Iraq and Iran. No, North Korea is actually going through like hell persecution. So yeah, underground church, they're going through a lot of persecution, but in terms of what are they like, I don't know. Like, it can be very different in different settings, Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What can people do to help persecuted church?
If you're listening to this podcast about North Korea, if the Lord has calling on your life for North Korea, please pray for North Korea. But I think this is bigger than North Korea. I think this podcast should remind the body of Christ that we have brothers and sisters in the world. Because North Korea is not alone in this journey. We have China, we have Iran, we have Somalia. So pray for the persecuted church, not limit to North Korea. I am Korean and I love Korea and I want to see breakthrough in North Korea. I have a special feelings for North Korea. But I don't want to demand other people for what I have been given. Some people have special assignment to pray for North Korea, but most people are not. That's a fact. So I don't want to press upon someone else what I'm feeling, but I want to invite the church to remember the persecuted church. So if you have a burden for the Middle East, pray for the Middle East. Pray for the Muslims. I love when I pray for the Muslims. So I think this is an invitation from the Lord, not just on the issue of North Korea, but reminding the rest of the Western body of Christ, saying, what we see and what we feel is not everything. We're living in our little bubble, and Jesus made it very clear that it is a narrow path, and in our context, that can be expressed differently. But like I said, Hebrews reminds us, remember those who are in chain, as though you are in chain. So that doesn't mean every minute, every second we have to think about them. I think it's just being intentional. And intentional meaning making a schedule. Don't say you will pray for the Middle East. Don't do that, because you won't. I promise. I've never, people who say they want to pray for Muslims and just like, it just passes on. Make a schedule. What I did is, I'm going to pray for North Korea every Wednesday. So every Wednesday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., and every Friday, 9:30 p.m. to 12 a.m., I pray for North Korea. And I've been doing this for over 6 years. And the only reason I was able to do this is because I made a schedule. So I would say be intentional. Because remembering is not a passive, it's not a passive activity. It's not like, oh yeah. It's not, no, remembering is an active, intentional choice and decision. So I would say remember. Remember the brothers, not just in North Korea, but also remember those who are in Somalia, in the Middle East, and pray for them, because prayer, it really works. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. If you want to know more about North Korea and persecuted churches across the world, please look for resources below. Thanks for joining me today. And remember, go forth and pray for the nations.